Well, you
suspect.
do. You've been on an airplane, right? And right. I mean, so can you explain to me when you're on an airplane, again, you can actually see the curvature, and then you have to explain to me, the different spheres of the moon. I
I'm
mean, if you
sorry.
have
When did you see the Earth? Yeah, I'm sorry. Did
when,
you see the Earth's curvature from a plane? You saw it?
yeah,
Really? That, that
quite
that's
awesome.
that's really something. How high were you?
Look, I've been on an international flight, but also explain to me, not a lunar eclipse, but the different
You
crests of the
know, you
moon.
know that Neil deGrasse Tyson says you can't see Earth's curvature from 35,000 feet, average commercial airliner, right? Don't tell me
Well,
you
are we
missed
supposed
that.
to believe him?
Don't tell me you missed
He's a
that
part of
quote.
me. He's part of the Me Too movement right now. So, as far as I'm
Oh.
concerned, everything he says is nothing.
That's great.
So,
Hey, I like that. I
so
like that. I like that. Sure.
but what about lunar eclipse?
Hold
Again,
up,
the
hold up, hold
crescent.
up. I got to get you on that because it seems like most of your argument for the globe so far is kind of like appealing to authority and appealing to consensus. Look, I went to college and I learned this, and I'm a fisherman and I did that, and everybody knows is this, and what about this? You're appealing to the mainstream, but at the same time, you want to throw Neil deGrasse Tyson, the king of mainstream science, in the trash when it doesn't suit you. And you gotta have to reconcile that somehow.
Hey guys, so that was just a little snippet of kind of an impromptu debate. It was really an invitation to be interviewed, but turns out one of the co-hosts was 100% in the Globe camp. I didn't even know this. So it turned out to be a kind of an impromptu debate, and I think it did pretty well against the Globe head, Globe tard, if you want to call it that. But so go ahead and I'll play the rest of the sort of interview slash debate now. Enjoy it.
And with us today is my guest, Chris, from the channel Red Pill Philosophy.
Most recently, I've been talking about, the nature of the world we live in. And, according to mainstream consensus science, we live on a spinning globe. And that's all fine and dandy. I believed I lived on a spinning globe my whole life as well, just like probably most of the people watching right now.
Yeah.
But basically what happened was I started to ask questions, and I realized that pretty much the majority of what I believe about the globe is basically just blind faith. I just believe it because someone else told me. First grade teacher told me, Neil deGrasse Tyson told me, the Science Channel told me, but I never really looked into it. And people call me crazy for even asking the questions, but that's what science should be about, right? It should be about asking questions and exploring for the truth and knowing things based on evidence, not blind faith. So that's where I am right now.
To my listeners right now, basically, this is what Chris called it, and this is what I'll call it too. It's called globe skepticism. So why don't you kind of fill in the listeners a little bit more on what globe skepticism means?
Yeah, well, it's funny because people love to throw out the term skeptic or skepticism. There's like this whole thing where like all these atheists on like YouTube, they call themselves skeptics, and like they say they're part of the skeptic community,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not really skeptics when you think about it, because all they do is defend the status quo, and all they do is reject outright any ideas or theories that aren't the current consensus. I call it a cult of consensus.
Right.
Their little pea brains work in a very two-dimensional way, and that is, oh, someone says something that sounds different or very strange to me. Okay, quick, type in Google, is this true?
Mm-hmm.
Boom, first result. First result says this is not true. And then they go with whatever the first result is, whatever the mainstream opinion is. Literally, it's the opposite of skepticism. I mean, if you think about the term skeptic, it's somebody who questions, who scrutinizes, who analyzes, who questions things.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, these people literally are basically just trend followers. They're intellectual trend followers. So people talk about skepticism. People talk about how they scrutinize things, and blind faith is a bad thing, and we should know why we believe the things we believe. But the globe, for some very bizarre reason, is like the one thing no one questions, period. No one questions it. Yeah, we question it nowadays because the internet exists, and for some freaking reason, like a collection of people all across the world connected via the internet started asking questions about what the mainstream heliocentric model tells us. And And that's basically what it's come down to at this point, is that people are starting to ask questions. And I find it funny that, before I even heard that there was a flat earth theory, which, by the way, when I first heard it, I laughed and thought it was absolutely stupid.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah, I think everyone who first hears about flat earth thinks it's stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And trust me, I don't want to believe the earth is flat. I didn't want to believe the earth is flat. And yes, I thought it was stupid. It actually, I mean, literally, like I would have moments where I'm like up awake at night and I'm thinking about, man, what if it's true that they lied to us about the globe? And what if the earth is flat? And what if there's like an edge? Or what if there's no edge? Or what if there's more land? And what if we don't even know where the hell we live? I mean, like some existential anxiety. Like, it did not feel good.
Right.
So yeah, going back to the whole skepticism thing and asking questions. Back in 2012, I got into this thing called simulation theory. And it's this idea that we might be living in a video game or a simulation and that our reality is an illusion. And I was literally willing to question the very nature of my reality before I even ever popped into my head to question, do I actually live on a spinning ball in space?
Right.
It's the most foregone conclusion. It's an ancient presupposition. It's literally been around for over 2,000 years. The notion that we live on a spinning ball in space surrounded by other spinning balls been around since the time of Pythagoras, who said, well, we must live on a spinning ball because I like spheres. I think spheres are a perfect shape. He was obsessed with spheres, Pythagoras was.
Mm-hmm.
And he reasoned that if the gods were going to have us live on anything, they would have us live on a sphere because the gods are perfect and they would choose a perfect shape to put us on. So this is literally where the roots of the globe comes from. It comes from a quasi-theological, pulled out of some Stone Age Flintstone guy's ass with no fucking evidence for it, just pulled out of his ass for no reason whatsoever. And then in the following 300, 400,000, 2,000 years, it's been a never-ending series of people going back to the fucking Stone Age times of the Greeks, trying to affirm the presupposition that we live on a sphere. So a lot of times people will mock flat earthers and say, well, you flat earthers don't have an actual working model, and you flat earthers don't have this and you don't have that. Yeah, we also didn't have the consensus of basically every educational system, every government for the last 1,000+ years guiding and directing everyone to not only think they live on a spinning ball, but to look for proof of it in all their observations, to the point for nowadays, people are literally, I'm surprised this isn't a psychiatrically diagnosed condition. People all across the planet are actually hallucinating curvature, bro. People get in an airplane at 35,000 feet altitude, and they look out their window, and they actually think they're seeing curvature. When Neil deGrasse Tyson came out like a year and a half ago, and he said you can't see it from 35,000 feet. He said you can't see it from 128,000 feet.
That's right.
But there's a mass hallucination taking place, and I have to ask myself, and I'll end it right. I'll end it on this note. I have to ask myself, A, why are people hallucinating the most foregone, obvious fact of our reality, that we live on a globe? And I forgot what my B point was, but I think I've rambled on enough, so there you go.
No, I was going to say, we got a couple questions for you, but before we get to that, I wanted to add on to what you're saying, and I know you mentioned this in a live stream not too long ago, that basically flat Earth, or the concept to question the world you live on, is sort of the ultimate, what did you say, the ultimate litmus test?
Not sure if I called it litmus test, but you know what? I probably did, actually, but I don't want to get credit for that because there's actually a documentary out there that's called Flat Earth: The Ultimate Litmus Test. So I don't want to make it seem like I coined the term, but I probably did say something along those lines. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was making a comparison, kind of like it's sort of like the ultimate red pill is the term that I was using, because it really, if you can stop for a moment and contemplate and reflect and just say to yourself, why do I believe what I believe? And then you kind of just, it just unfolds from there. It's actually a pretty incredible experience. I have a few more points to add, but I'm going to go to these questions here. Eyes Wide Open asks, it's a 2-point question. What would be the motive for lying to us, or is it just ignorance? And again, this is a very common question, I think.
Yep.
What do you have to say to that?
Yeah, look, it's one of the most common questions, and honestly, it's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
Why would they lie to us? Well, there's a few. I have a few answers to that, but I'll give you the most down to earth answer, which is, why would they lie to us? Okay, well, here's why. Like I was saying a moment ago, we've believed we live on a ball for 2,500 years before we had the technology like rockets to get high up enough to really get a sight and get a look at what we're looking at. So we believe we live on a ball long before we can prove it. And so we believed in it for hundreds of thousands of years, passed down from governments to its citizens, from educators to their students, from family to their children. It's become an embedded fact, foregone conclusion that we live on a ball even before we had rocket technology. Mm-hmm. Fast forward to the 1960s. The United States government is in a space race with Russia. And, if Russia, which at the time had a lot of advanced technology, even superior rocket technology to the Americans, it's a good possibility that the United States had all the motive in the world to fake the moon landing. So the United States fakes the moon landing. They broadcast images from the moon. They take pictures of the whole entire Earth for the first time in the history of humanity. They get a picture of the whole Earth from the Apollo module in space, far, far, far away from the Earth. But if it was all faked, then the United States government had to make a decision on what these doctored images, these doctored photos of Earth were going to look like. What do you think they were going to make Earth look like? A flat Earth? A triangular prism Earth? A cube Earth? No! They're going to make it look like a sphere Earth, the very thing everyone's been believing we've been living on for the last 2,500 years, of course.
Absolutely.
So of course, they're going to make it look like a sphere. But let's say they faked it, and there's two ways this can go at this point. People say, okay, well, why would they lie? Why would they hide it? Well, that's enough of a reason right there. I mean, if they ever, let's say NASA went up, maybe they faked the first moon landing, but in 5 years later, they had enough technology to actually go up really, really high and really, really far away. And let's say they actually finally took a real photo, and it turns out it was flat, or it turns out it's nothing like what we thought it was, mm-hmm. or it turns out space in our solar system is nothing like we thought it was. What are they going to do? They cannot invalidate the first moon landing and the first photo of Earth, because if they show you new images and photos in later Apollo missions that contradict the first one in a significant way, then that means they faked the first one. So if they fake the first moon landing, everything about space after that has to match the first fakery. That's and right. So for the rest of NASA's history, for the rest of their existence going forward, everything they do has to match the original forgery. And people talk about motive. Hey, man, space race and the U.S. government faking the moon landing and having to coincide everything thereafter with the original is more than enough obvious, down-to-earth, reasonable motive that I can see.
Well, and that's not even talking about financial motive, because from what I've heard from talking heads on the subject is that NASA makes, $50 million a day?
Something like that, yeah.
I mean, that's financial incentive has to be a part of it.
I'm here.
Okay, great. Lamprey's in. Awesome, man. We're just we just dove right into flat Earth and globe skepticism, and we're just carrying on.
Yeah, I'm listening.
Right on.
NASA. What does it stand for? Never a straight answer.
I wanted to add, we were talking a little bit about moon landings too, but I want to go back a bit. And Chris, when you mentioned, we believed a globe sort of was in our consciousness. We've all kind of conditioned to believe it for thousands of years. And even before we even had the capacity to fly high enough to even get a good look. Do you know who the first man into the stratosphere was?
Wasn't it a Russian?
No, it was a Belgian scientist. I don't remember his first name. His last name was Picard. And
yes, I've heard of him, yeah.
And that's where they got the name for the Star Trek character. They took it from that. Anyway, this Picard, this Belgian scientist Picard, he went up in a balloon with a companion. And this was last century, so I think it was like in the 1930s, something like that. And they flew up in a balloon, first man to ever reach the stratosphere. And when he came down, they asked him, what did it look like? And he said it looked like a giant circular dish with an upturned edge. He never said anything about it being a globe or seeing some kind of curve. So that's just.
And by the way, just to add real quick, his observations were published in, I think, Scientific American.
Yes.
Back in the day. So even Scientific American back in the day was publishing his observations from up there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They did. They published his observations and his quote. I didn't quote it exactly, but when he said it looked like a dish with an upturned edge, that was published in Scientific American. You're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
And getting on. Okay, so someone knows who you are here. Romer 45 says didn't expect Red Pill Philosophy to show up here. Well, here he is, man. Here he is. So the other thing I wanted to touch on about the moon. Like, I've never believed we went to the moon. I was always a skeptic of the moon. And when I started looking into the same topics you are now, of course that comes up. Have you ever seen that documentary called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon?
Yeah, I saw it like a year ago or something.
So in that documentary, and again, I don't believe anything NASA says, so that's another reason I'm a complete skeptic about what we're told.
I got a question. How do cell phones work?
Towers. It's all land-based.
What's the other way of them working? I mean, you're in Canada, and Red Pill Philosophy is in Florida. Obviously, towers aren't going to triangulate us having able to communicate from Canada, middle of Alberta to New York, and then triangulate back to Florida at such speed. So what's the other way?
What's your name? What's your name again, man?
Lamprey. You can call me Lamprey.
Call him Lamprey.
Lamprey?
Yeah.
Hey, are you a globetard?
Yeah, I am. You ever take celestial navigation?
You're a straight up globetard? Like you're 100% in the globe camp?
Absolutely.
No doubt, no doubts whatsoever. Eh? No skeptics.
No, it's because I fish and I took celestial navigation in college when I went to.
You don't think it's a coincidence that we believed we lived on a ball for 2,500 years before we even had any real evidence to prove it? You don't think that's a strange coincidence?
No, because again, I fish and I took celestial navigation. So in order to get that degree, in order to know how to navigate the ocean, the first thing you need to understand is that you live on a crystal ball, so to speak.
Well, this is another thing too. Is a lot of proofs that people that are faithful to the idea of a globe, a lot of proofs they give can also be reproduced on a flat model. So your observations that you're making aren't necessarily proof of a globe because they can be reproduced, and it's been proven they can be reproduced on a flat model. So
I'm open to the moon landing thing. I mean, there's a lot of weird shit with that, but again, from me just fishing and when I went to college, majoring what I majored in. No.
What did you major in?
I was a merchant mariner.
So you can get a degree in like fucking fishing?
In transportation with freighters and oil tankers.
So did you learn formally in school about the constellations and the stars and all that? Or that's something you just learned?
Celestial navigation.
Right. Was that like just a class you took, or is that like a whole degree? I'm curious. I have never heard that.
I had two classes in it.
Okay. Yeah, so, I mean that's what I would.
Like if you go fishing, you know, you can actually see. I mean, this is obviously if you learn about flat Earth and stuff. The first thing everyone discusses is that the mass of a ship disappears along the horizon. So I mean, that's to me. I mean, that kind of just ends it. And then the other thing is when a vessel goes over 1,000 feet, which many tankers do, cruise liners, aircraft carriers, when they're a certain length, you have to factor in the curvature of the Earth with the keel and everything, because there'll actually be more weight at the bow of the ship from gravity because of the curvature of the Earth, and it's pulling down on the bow of the ship.
I'm sorry, how big are these ships?
What is it? Like about 1,100 feet, 1,000. The really big ones. We're talking things that go over 1,000 feet.
So 1,000 feet, there's a significant difference in gravitational pull from the front to the back. Yeah, that sounds. I find that silly. The way I find Coriolis effect silly. Look, there's a lot of questions about the Coriolis effect.
Yeah.
I think that there's a ton of theories. I think there's a bunch of theories that people come up with because we've been presupposing we live on a sphere for 2,500 years.
Yeah.
So I would be careful to say, oh, look, they take into account this and they do all of this and they do all of this. Yeah, because we've been presupposing we live on the underside of a spinning ball since before we had any proof for it. Literally going back to Pythagoras, who pulled it out of his ass, because according to the Wikipedia page on it, which unless someone forged the Wikipedia page and the sources that are attributed to it are incorrect, but according to that, Pythagoras thought we live in a sphere because he thought the gods would put us on a perfect shape, and he thought spheres were perfect shapes. So if the gods are perfect, they would put us on a perfect shape. So Pythagoras thought we lived on a sphere 2,500 years ago.
Go back to what I asked before about, you know, the way we're communicating. How are we communicating? Can't not be by towers. What is the other way that we communicate by?
Well, right now through the internet, we're using a cable. We don't like right now. It used to be phone lines. Now it's cable lines, and they're getting into fiber optics.
Satellites.
Well, what are you appealing to? What are you suggesting? GPS is what are you saying is allowing us to communicate?
I'm asking, do you believe in satellites? Yes or no?
I think they exist. Are they floating in space? I'm not too sure. I was recently doing some research on satellites and how most of them fly in a sun-synchronous near-polar orbit, but they don't seem to go. There's very few. In fact, I don't even think there's any active satellites. According to one website that accumulates all the satellites that are active and inactive at the moment, I don't think there's any satellites active right now, at least according to that site, which I think is a United Nations affiliated website. But it has a list of all the satellites currently active, and apparently none of them that are currently active fly a actual polar orbit, which would be 90 degrees. You'll get generally what you'll find is that the satellites are flying a sun synchronous near polar orbit, meaning they'll be around 89 degrees. You'll see some at 91, you see some at 92, you see some at 86, but they'll never be at 90-degree orbit. And the consequence of this absence of satellites flying on a, or maybe you'd rather use the word orbiting on a true 90-degree polar orbit around the so-called planet Earth, the consequence of that is that a lot of satellite imagery, there's a giant gaping hole in the South Pole. Look it up. A lot of satellite imagery, in fact, I think the colloquial term for it is a pole hole. They even have a term for it because it's so common, a pole hole. Satellite imagery that literally there's just a giant gaping black hole of no data because the satellites aren't going over the South Pole. Now, here's what's interesting is that, guess what? On the Flat Earth model, at least the mainstream one, there is no South Pole. So I was looking into that the other day, and I'm like, that's a pretty interesting coincidence. Now, people say they have all these excuses. Oh, it's because the Earth is tilted at it's tilted on its axis. So because it's tilted on its axis, it's more fuel efficient for the satellites to be slightly off 90 degrees. So they're not on a polar orbit, they're near polar. And that allows them to drift around the Earth in a way that's more fuel efficient or something. But let me just finish this little nugget off with this, which is a few months ago, there was all this buzz in the media about Antarctica because satellite images just captured the most accurate map of Antarctica ever, the most accurate map of the continent of Antarctica. And one of the guys who was heading up the operation with the satellites, he gave out a quote, and he's like, yeah, before this, the most accurate map we had was of Mars. But now the most accurate map of any continent we have is Antarctica. And guess what this so-called most accurate map ever of any continent anywhere had right in the smack dab middle of it? A giant black empty hole in the South Pole, because the satellites, even on the so-called most accurate continental map ever created, they just didn't have the time or care enough to have the freaking satellite move over 1 degree from the common 89 or 91 degree near polar, sun-synchronous near polar. They didn't care enough to just put it on the 90 degree axis and let it get a couple images. No, they just said the most accurate map of Antarctica is going to have a giant gaping hole in the South Pole in the same area where, by the way, according to the mainstream flat Earth model, there is no South Pole. So I thought that was very bizarre.
Well, let me kind of jump in on satellites. This is interesting because just today, actually, I was watching a show on a channel called Crow 777. He gets into all sorts of crazy stuff, but he does talk a little bit about globe skepticism. And he came up with this, what he called his rule or his law. And he calls it the law of high definition. And he says this is how his law of high definition goes. Not a single, he goes, anything that truly exists in the modern era, and this is a direct quote because I wrote it down. Anything that truly exists in the modern era that can be filmed in HD, high definition, will be filmed in HD. There isn't a single photograph of a satellite in space filmed in any kind of high definition. It is all computer graphics and cartoons. Not a single image exists. Not a single one. And according to Crow's law of high definition, that's impossible. Every single person is walking around, billions of people are walking around the plane with high definition cameras in their phones. We're taking high definition videos of everything. Everything gets captured. NASA has a budget of $50 million a day. Not a single high definition photograph or video exists of a single satellite. So that's something to think about.
Yeah, I can't recall ever seeing one. So, hey, on the topic, are you still there? By the way, is Lamprey?
Yep, I'm here, man.
Hey, on the topic, real quick, of the constellations and tracking them in the sky and all that. Recently I was looking into something and I discovered that because one of the age-old proofs, the old Flintstone Stone Age men that apparently proved we live on a globe over 2,000 years ago. These stone men, Flintstone cavemen. One of them came from Aristotle, and he wrote in his treatise on the heavens. He said that one of the proofs we must live on a sphere is, by the way, back then people were debating it according to Aristotle's writings. Like people were saying, oh yeah, we live on a flat disk, and here's the reason why. They give their reason. They were going back and forth back then. Mm-hmm. But Aristotle wrote that one of the proofs we live on a sphere is that as you travel north or south, the constellations will appear and disappear behind the horizon. And so he figured that must be a proof we live on a sphere, because the constellations are falling behind the sphere, and depending on how far you move, blah, blah, blah. But here's the problem. Just like Iam said just a moment ago, he said that there's always like a secondary counter explanation for all the things we see, including constellations and stuff like that. So here's what I was thinking about the other day, is that when Aristotle said that as you move south towards the equator, stars start to disappear. Let's take the North Star. Let's take Polaris, for example. You're familiar with Polaris, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Are you aware that as you get closer to the equator, Polaris descends towards the horizon? and that once you go past the equator, once you go south of the equator, you can no longer see Polaris because it's hidden behind the giant curvature of the Earth.
Yeah, that's what they say. Yeah, but it's
okay.
true. It's true. It does disappear behind the horizon. Yes, the farther south
Right.
you go. Yeah.
Right. So that is allegedly that's what happens. Allegedly that's what they say occurs. The problem with that is really simple. There's another explanation.
Yes.
The other explanation could be perspective, angular size. Very simple, very very common, scientifically validated, thing.
Mm-hmm.
The further away you get from something that is above your eye level, the more it will appear to descend. So you can just imagine looking down a very long hallway, and you have a ceiling over your head. And in the distance, at the end of the hallway, the ceiling over your head will appear as if it is dropping towards your eye level.
Yep.
Common experience. It's called perspective. It's called angular size. Well, what if the reason that Polaris, the North Star, appears to descend towards the horizon, and the horizon generally is at your eye level? You look out on an ocean. The water, converges in your sight around your eye level. The water line meets the sky around your eye level. Generally speaking, the horizon is at your eye level.
And that's regardless of how high you go, which actually is observable evidence that leans towards a flat model. Because if you were on a ball, the higher you went, the lower the horizon would not meet your eye level. It would eventually drop. But that's not what anybody ever observes.
That's the question. How high do you have to go for it to drop? And I don't know what the math is on it. There's some globers who claim they've. Yeah. Go ahead.
I know the math, but anyway, go ahead. We can talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, I don't know how high you have to be for it to drop, but there's some globers who say, yeah, look, I'm in a plane right now, and I have my little instrument, freaking level thing, and some of them claim that it does drop. I don't trust those. I find that all very suspect.
Well, you've been on an airplane, right? Right? I mean, so can you explain to me when you're on an airplane, you can actually see the curvature, and then you have to explain to me, the different spheres of the moon.
I'm sorry. Did you see the Earth? Yeah, I'm sorry. Did you see the Earth's curvature from a plane? You saw it?
Yeah.
Really? That's really something. How high were you?
Look, I've been on an international flight, but also explain to me not a lunar eclipse, but the different crests of the moon.
You know that Neil deGrasse Tyson says you can't see Earth's curvature from 35,000 feet, average commercial airliner, right? Don't tell me you missed that. Don't tell me you missed that quote.
He's part of the Me Too movement right now, so as far as I'm concerned, everything he said
That's great. I like that.
But what about eclipse?
Hold up. I got to get you on that, because it seems like most of your argument for the globe so far is kind of like appealing to authority and appealing to consensus. Look, I went to college and I learned this, and I'm a fisherman and I did that, and everybody knows is this, and what about this? You're appealing to the mainstream, but at the same time, you want to throw Neil deGrasse Tyson, the king of mainstream science, in the trash when it doesn't suit you. And you gotta have to reconcile that somehow, man, because he says you can't see curvature from 4 times the height of the average commercial airliner. He says you can't see it from 128,000 feet. That's 4 times the average height of your commercial airliner. So, I mean, what curvature did you see?
And if you see further from higher distances.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
First, now you're moving the goalposts, because first you said you saw curvature. Now you're just saying you can see further.
So, man, read the fuck wine to what I said before. Because you would jump right over that. You jump over the fact that things disappear on the horizon, right? When I fish, objects disappear, do they not?
When you fish, objects disappear. You mean when you're moving away on the water from buildings or something?
Correct. Or if I look at another boat.
Actually, you know what? Let's...
No. Stop.
I want to answer. Let me answer. Let me answer. I have an answer.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
It's going further and further away. You can see the hull. Then you see the little cabin or whatever, and then the mast.
Let me explain it to you. I'm gonna explain it to you. Okay. All right. So it's called a diffraction limit. It's associated with angular size. It's the way our vision works. So again, you look down a long hallway, the ceiling above your head, the floor beneath your feet, and the walls on your left and right side will slowly converge. It almost looks like a pyramid shape. And in the far in the distance, the hallway is going to converge into a single little point.
It's called the vanishing point.
It's called the vanishing point. Sometimes it's called the convergence zone, whatever. If you're looking out at the ocean and you're looking out at buildings in the distance on the water, okay, the ocean, the floor beneath you, just like the floor in the hallway, as it gets further away, will appear to rise up. And it'll appear to rise up to your eye level in the distance, and then the water line in the distance, the so-called horizon, will also meet the sky right around your eye level as you're looking out at these buildings.
When I use binoculars, they're still disappearing, are they not?
Well, shit, I do long distance zoom observations. I see the whole fucking lighthouse. Okay. I see little trees around its base.
Chris.
My observations show the entire, all the buildings are completely visible in my observations using a Nikon P1000.
Okay, I want to set that up actually. I want you to continue, but I just want to set it up for Lamprey and for the listeners because I've been watching you do this stuff, right? So, Chris has a P1000. What is that, a Nikon?
Yeah.
Okay, he's got this incredible camera, which is very popular within sort of the flat Earth, quote-unquote flat Earth community. And it's got this, what is it, how many, first of all, explain what that camera is, because I'm kind of setting this up for you to answer.
Yeah, it's an ultra mega zoom camera, 3,000 millimeter zoom with 6,000 times digital zoom added on top of that. It's just insanely powerful. You can zoom in on things 13, 20 or more miles away. That's it.
And when something appears to, and this is something that I think a lot of people that haven't really questioned the shape of the place we live, the phenomenon of something disappearing over the horizon could be explained by a curve, but if it was a curve and you watched the ship disappear over that horizon, if it was a curve, you would not be able to bring it back into focus if you zoomed in with a camera because it would be behind a mound of water. Yet, with the camera you have, you're constantly bringing images back that have supposedly disappeared over the curve. Correct?
Yeah, and then they blame it on, they say refraction is causing the atmosphere is refracting the light, causing things that should be hidden behind the ancient presuppositional Pythagoras pulled it out of his ass curvature. It's causing buildings to loom up behind the curvature. So it's quite convenient because, God, I mean, if we lived on a sphere, it should be easy to prove it, right? I mean, the building, it should be pretty straightforward. We live on a sphere, the building should be half missing from the bottom up. You zoom in, and it's completely there.
Exactly.
Oh, no, hang on, wait a minute. No. That age-old Aristotle proof of ships disappearing bottom up. Wait. There's a little asterisk there. And that is refraction. If you're zooming in on things that should be missing behind the curvature, no, it's refraction, dude. It's bending the light upwards, and it's, all this. So, wait. If it's not as, okay, first of all, did Aristotle know that refraction existed when he was looking at shit on the horizon? And if he didn't know refraction existed, then how can we trust that his proof of things disappearing bottom up wasn't just a distorting, bending light? I mean, what do we know if there's apparently all these magical effects taking place at the distance around the horizon? Yeah. So it's just funny. It's just another example of the globetards moving the goalpost.
Yeah, they have to prove it. But another thing, too, I wanted to mention, just to kind of fill in Lamprey and also the listeners, because I know that, Chris, that you know a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about, and I know a lot of the stuff you're talking about. But the way I see it, if a person wants to prove it's a globe, or to prove otherwise, there are two observations you can make. You can look down or you can look up. And those two observations are connected, but if one doesn't match, then neither does the other. And what I find is that when it comes to proving that there is no curvature, then our observations are focused on the ground. And if we can focus on the ground and prove there is no curve, then it doesn't matter what the celestial bodies do. It doesn't matter. The entire globe model is so fragile. It needs all these little numbers to be put in place. It needs all these tiny little, and these forces such as gravity and so on and so forth. If one of those little pieces falls apart, the entire model crumbles.
Yeah,
absolutely crumbles.
That's very true. That is very true. And the same is also true. I heard that gravity is the reason. Freaking physicists and astronomers think that there's dark matter, and that dark matter makes up 90% of the whole universe, or whatever the hell they say. I heard this recently, that the only reason they even think there's dark matter and all this weird thing they can't identify that comprises the majority of the universe is because of gravity.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically, if you get rid of gravity, a lot of the holes in the modern astronomical model basically they just go away, because it's gravity itself as a theory is what's causing the issues, because apparently there's no actual proof of gravity. And that's a funny one. People get freaked out by that, because they're like, wait a minute, if I drop my phone out of my hand, it hits the floor, how can you say there's no proof of gravity? Well, no, because gravity isn't just things falling straight down. Gravity is things being pulled to the center of mass.
Yes.
So there is no real up or down on a globe. It's just towards the center of mass, because down for somebody in America is actually up for somebody in Australia. So there is no real universal up and down on the globe. It's just pulling towards the center of mass.
That's right.
And all I ever experience is things falling straight down. I got on a flight the other day for 10 hours, I flew from the United States to the United Kingdom. I don't know, what is that, a quarter of the way around the globe, halfway around the globe? I'm not really sure, but it's a substantial amount of curvature around the globe that I went. Got on a 10-hour flight, never saw curve, never felt curve. Landed in the UK. I got out, down was still under my feet. If I drop my phone on the floor, it still falls down. Never do I ever experience myself going around a curve. I never see curvature. Down is just down. Yeah. So people say,
I will agree with you with that. I do find that to be fucking crazy, that concept.
Well, this is another thing too. Gravity aside for a moment, gravity plays a big part in the globe model. You remove gravity, their entire model falls apart, and we can get into that. But I wanted to make one more caveat based on what I mentioned, where there's basically two observations you can make. You can look up to the stars and the celestial heavens to try to prove that we're on a ball, or you can look down and you can try to prove it. And as far as I'm concerned, we're laymen, right? We're not astronauts. We're not NASA scientists. So if we want to do experiments and prove to ourselves one way or the other what the shape of the world is, we really need to focus downwards, all right? Because, to be honest, whenever you hear an argument from someone who is really indoctrinated into the globe model, they will inevitably point up, and they'll say, what about this celestial phenomenon? What about NASA? What about the people that have been on the space station? And none of that can be verified by the individual making the statement.
That's very true.
That's not evidence. How many people have been to space? Like a couple dozen? Ever in the history of humankind? And
how many people have been to the sun? How many people have been to Polaris? How many people have been to all the stars that they claim to know all the distances to? How do they even know the sun is a giant ball of gas? How do they know all this shit? They've never been there, but they absolutely know it.
Yes, and this is the thing, is that for layman people like all of us here, we can't verify any of those claims. And let's not even talk about distant stars in the sun. Let's talk about, let's say, the space station or the moon. How many people have been there? Maybe a couple dozen people. So a lot of people will go to not even their own anecdotal evidence. They'll take other people's anecdotal evidence as fact, and they cannot verify it. And basically, man, when you're talking red pill, you need to be able to observe it, repeat it, and verify it. And if you can't, you got to doubt it. You know, as an individual, as a human being, you have to doubt it. You have to be skeptical.
Everything you know is wrong. You know, it's funny you mentioned this because I always question, like, you know, when I drink tap water or, you know, I'm drinking a soda, what's actually in that soda? I'm supposed to read the ingredients and go by the ingredients. You know, there's very few people that actually can, you know, take a sample of water and tell you exactly what it is you're actually drinking, because the equipment to know these things cost thousands of dollars, and there's very few people that have these instruments. I do think that is quite deliberate, and they withhold the technology from the masses to let you know exactly what it is you're eating, drinking, inhaling, so on and so forth.
Or even where you live. I mean, think about it. Like, NASA has a monopoly, and there's a few other space agencies, but if you think they're not working together, you're crazy, because we're talking about, it's a priesthood as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I've gotten to the point now in my skepticism about the model of the place we live, to the point where it's turned, people that have been so conditioned into the concept of the globe are religiously zealots. They're zealots, man. When it comes,
I've come to believe that the globe and space is a religion for atheist Satanists. That's basically what it comes down to. It's atheist Satanists who hate God.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you're an atheist Satanist, if you're an atheist Satanist, nothing makes you happier than thinking you just live on a spinning space rock in a universe with no purpose, bouncing around. You're not the center. It's all random. That's literally your religion. Your religion is that. And you know, I've just gotten to the point now where I don't believe this crap anymore. I just can't. And it's something I grew up believing it. I always believed in it. I never questioned it. And then for some reason, some people started making flat Earth videos. I saw a couple, and I'm like, well, you know what? I should be able to disprove this shit. I went out and I tried to disprove it, and so far I can't disprove it.
That's exactly that's what happens with most people, and like.
Well, you don't have the resources, you know, because you're not at that level. You know, in order to get to that level, you have to have like 3 PhDs, and you know, you have to go through the motions. You have to meet people that are, you know, much higher on the wealth you know, hierarchy, so to speak, to actually gain that type of knowledge. You know, again, I was just mentioning the fact about how we don't actually know what it is we're drinking or eating. You know, my friend worked for a certification company back in Cambodia, and he had access to spectrometers where he can measure and let you know and verify exactly what it is, what something is made up of. So I gave him a piece of my jewelry. It said that this was pure 100%, you know, silver. It was a necklace I gave him. I go, yo, let me know if this is really silver. And then he tested it, and like a week later, he gave me the report back. He says it's actually only 80% silver. The certification that came with the jewelry that you own is false. It's not real.
They lied.
So there you go. It's lied. So what I purchased, the necklace I purchased, was in fact not pure silver.
Here's another question Jonathan Hardy asks. If the Earth, and this is a very popular question, and before I read it, I just want to preface with the fact and stating again that most of the questions that come from Globe Believers is based on not their own observations and not on anything that they can prove to themselves, all right? Which is why they often point to NASA and space and that kind of stuff. But Jonathan Hardy asks, if the Earth is flat, where's the edge? And again...
Yeah, no, this is a great one. Okay, where's the edge of the universe?
Yes. Where's the edge of the universe?
That's all I have to say. I know that the notion of an edge or boundary to our reality sounds crazy, because mainstream heliocentric model has pushed the edge of the universe out there in space so fucking far, astronomically far away, that we just don't even think about it. I remember when I was a kid, I think I looked up to my dad one day and I asked him, hey, what's at the edge of space? And of course he didn't have an answer. But they tell you it's so far away, the edge of the universe, that, or sometimes they say it's just infinitely
expanding. Yes,
yeah. That you don't even have. Literally, it's so far away and so detached that you don't even bother thinking about it. So I know the notion of an edge or boundary to your reality sounds crazy, but the only reason it sounds crazy is because your mainstream heliocentric quote science has pushed it so far away that no one even bothers thinking about it. But I just throw the question right back. Where's the edge of the universe?
No,
what happened?
You can't do that. Where's the edge of the earth?
Do you just crash into a wall at the end of the universe? Do you fall out the other side of the universe and descend into an eternal abyss? Like, I can throw these silly questions right back at you guys.
Where's the edge of Earth? You're saying it's flat. It has to end at some point. Where is it?
Not necessarily. Some people think it could be some people think it could be an infinite plane. Other people think there's a dome and there is an edge. It's funny. Elon Musk says we live in a simulation. And guess what? If you play your average video game, what happens when you get to the edge of a map? There's an invisible wall you can't get past. So if Elon Musk says we live in a simulation, then fuck, there probably is a damn dome at the edge of the flat Earth.
Absolutely, man. Well, this is the thing. It's like,
stop. Where's the edge of the Earth?
We don't know.
That's the question.
Have you heard of the Antarctic Treaty?
Yes, I've heard of the Antarctic Treaty.
Okay, well, look, if you're going to ask me where the edge of the Earth is, I ask you to petition all the world's governments to stop making it so hard for people to access Antarctica and explore. Because that, according to the mainstream flat Earth model, the edge is Antarctica. It's an ice wall. The South Pole, Antarctica, is not this little patch at the bottom of the globe. According to the mainstream flat Earth model, the edge, the South Pole, is an ice wall around all the water, all the oceans, and all the countries, all the continents. So the problem is that the Antarctic Treaty, which was signed in, I think, 1959, makes it damn near impossible for anybody to go exploring there freely. Someone did a video recently. They investigated all the things you have to do. It's probably easier to become a citizen of a country than it is to go to Antarctica. It's damn impossible. It's damn impossible.
I have a friend that went to Antarctica.
Huh?
What?
I have a friend that went to Antarctica.
Great.
Okay, he went to the edge on a little science base and did some silly little experiment. I mean, that doesn't prove.
It didn't happen. He didn't go to Antarctica,
He went to Antarctica, but did he map out the entire continent and prove it's this little patch on the bottom of a sphere?
No. Well, here's another thing, too, that's interesting about the Antarctica, and I don't know if Lamprey's aware of it, but you were right when you said the Antarctic Treaty was signed in 1959. Now, what happened prior to that is Admiral Byrd went on an expedition, and he wasn't the first. There were many expeditions down to... And not only is the Antarctica financially impossible for the layman to go to, the amount of...
Yeah, it cost my friend about $15,000 to go for 2 weeks.
The amount of money, and most of those people that go, they're just going on a tourist vacation. You can't go as an individual and explore. You cannot
Did your friend go there as a tourist, or was it like science expedition?
No. How else is he going to actually go? He's not a scientist. He's an engineer, but yeah, he went on a group tour.
Exactly.
Okay, here's what's funny. It's funny you bring that up. I was looking into it the other day, and apparently there is a Antarctic. I don't remember the acronym. I don't remember the organization's exact name, but it was something like the Antarctic Alliance of Tourists, tour guides, and it's like. It's literally like an organization of companies that provide tours to Antarctica. They're all part, I don't know about all of them, but there's an organization where many of them are part of, and the purpose of this tour guide company organization is for all of them to come together under the Antarctic Treaty in the name of protecting Antarctica's environment and in the name of protecting science, which, by the way, is the same pretense for the signing of the Antarctic Treaty. So I find it interesting that even the tour guides, I don't know about every company that's providing tours, but certainly enough of them that there's a little organization they all join. Private tour companies join an organization to abide by the stipulations of the Antarctic Treaty itself.
Yeah.
So again, even your little tour guides, these people are strictly adhering to the Antarctic Treaty.
Yeah. Well, Hardy says, Jonathan Hardy asks, if there's no edge, then we should still be discovering new lands. And I say, maybe they have. I mean, from what I have read and watched, there was an interview with Admiral Byrd who went down before the Antarctic Treaty was signed. All right, now, I don't know if everybody's aware of this, but he, in an interview he made before 1959, he said, there is a continent the size of the United States beyond the pole that is completely uninhabited and no resources are being taken from it. Now, whether or not he was telling the truth, I don't know. But again, when you talk about the treaty and these tour guides, they're compartmentalizing and they're monopolizing our ability to observe and to measure ourselves. It's the same with NASA. They monopolize that information. Nobody here can go and verify what they tell us. We're not allowed to. It's that simple.
It's funny. Just like a month and a half ago, NASA launched a probe investigation into Elon Musk because he smoked a joint on the Joe Rogan podcast. So people who say, oh, Elon Musk, it's a private space company. You're saying even private companies are faking this whole thing? Yeah, how private and how independent is Elon Musk when just smoking?
It's subsidized heavily.
Smoking a joint gets NASA peering down his ass because he smoked a little joint on the Joe Rogan podcast.
No, we plan on covering that, and we just never got around to it. Yes, Tesla is heavily subsidized by U.S. taxpayers. That's 100% correct. And along with a lot of the equipment and the engineering, it's all military-grade equipment used in Tesla's designs.
Well, there you go. And it's not only that. Jonathan says people have sailed around the Antarctica. No, they haven't. Look it up. When Byrd was exploring, this again, I'm not going to quote it exactly correctly. I'm just going from memory. But when he was exploring, commissioned to explore the Antarctica, they sailed and sailed and sailed for thousands of miles and never found a break around it. Now that's
you know who did do it? The Germans did it during World War II.
Well, the Germans went down there. That's what I heard.
They numerous times they went down. What were they doing down there? A little bit strange. That's a little bit off topic, but yes, the Germans did. In fact, I don't know if they actually went around the whole thing, but
they didn't.
They did heavily explore Antarctica for reasons that a lot of people question.
Well, they
were probably to see the edge, find the edge, see the edge.
Yeah, they were looking for the edge. They were looking for the edge.
I bet they were. I bet they were, and either they never found one because it was an infinite plane, or they found the edge. They found that invisible barrier, which, as far as I'm concerned, that's basically coming face to face with, call him God, call it your creator, call it the.
They were looking for the thing.
Looking for something.
Looking for the thing.
I was gonna say, gonna say something, man.
What about time zones then?
Time zones easily explained by just a smaller local sun.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And by the way, I was going to say earlier about your constellation observations, easily explained once again by closer stars. Basically, what they do is, again, like I was saying earlier, but I didn't get to finish. Aristotle said that the more you move north or south, the less you can see certain stars. They disappear behind the horizon. Well, that could either be because you're going around a curve, and the curve of the Earth is blocking out stars as you go around the other side of the curve. Or it could also be simply perspective. Mm-hmm. But, of course, for that to happen, the stars would have to be much closer because of parallax. The stars are really, really far away. Moving across the surface of the Earth is not going to cause them to appear to descend in the sky because of your movement. Again, it has to do with like looking down a long hallway. Things that are further away, the ceiling further away appears lower. If the stars are much closer than they tell us, however, then your movement, Aristotle's movement back and forth across the Earth, the reason his movement appeared to cause the stars to descend and rise above the horizon could easily just have been a consequence of perspective. If the stars are much closer, then movement across the Earth after 10, 20, 30, 100 miles could have a significant impact on how low the stars above your head appear as they move further away from you, just like the ceiling above your head in a long hallway appears lower in the distance.
Yeah.
But again, that changes how far away they say the stars are. But that's what they tell us. they tell us that they're mind-bogglingly so far away that just in terms of parallax alone, no amount of movement across the Earth's surface is going to really have any substantial effect. So.
Well, absolutely, and when you're talking about perspective, if that phenomenon of things dipping below the horizon as you move away from them has to do with a curve, then you shouldn't, and it can only be accounted by a curve, then you shouldn't see that same phenomenon on a flat surface. I challenge anybody here to go into a large gymnasium with a very flat floor. Take a camera and put it at one end right on the floor, maybe a few inches above, to kind of simulate eye level on a larger plane. Then take an object and film that object as you move it all the way to the end of that gymnasium. It will disappear below the horizon, but the surface is completely flat. So the phenomenon, like you said, Chris, can be explained in other ways. It doesn't need a globe model to explain that phenomenon.
That's what I found. Hey, I got to get going a little bit, so I don't know if there's maybe like another last question from the audience or something we can take, maybe, or whatever.
No, it's too bad you're only going to be here for an hour.
That's all right.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll do it again. Maybe we'll do it again. I had fun. It was a lively discussion.
Yeah, cool.
All right. Well, let's say to end it off, I'll just make Hardy said, let's talk about something else, and I think I want to just point this out. Hardy, we get a lot of different people on this channel. I don't want to always talk about hypergamy and women. I want to talk about a lot of different subjects. So this is one of the reasons why I got Chris on the show today. And why don't you kind of, maybe before you leave, explain to some of the listeners kind of what's happened, the phenomenon of what happens when you start talking about this stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, with my YouTube channel, I think before I started talking about Flat Earth, I might have had like 195,000 subscribers, something like that, and then
wow.
Now I'm like at 192,000, and I credit a lot of that to my incessant Flat Earth shit posting I've been doing for the last 6 months.
I love it.
You know, people are used to my videos being about Trump, being about anti-feminism, being about all these topics, and then all of a sudden I come out of total left field with this Flat Earth shit, and yeah, it pissed a lot of people off. A lot of people think it's stupid. They think it's ridiculous. They think it's irrelevant. They don't see the point in talking about it. And I would argue the primary reason people think it's not worth talking about is because they don't think it's possible that the Earth could be flat and that we're being lied to on such a massive scale, or that we, at the very least, fucked up the astronomy this bad for so long. But hey, man, you know, people unsubscribe, and that's fine. You know, I've been used to it over the years, but you know, in the end, this Flat Earth shit it's not going anywhere, man. People are asking serious questions, and despite the mainstream media always strawmanning Flat Earthers and interviewing the bottom of the barrel stupid Flat Earthers to make Flat Earthers in general look really fucking stupid, despite all of that, some of the smartest people that I've ever listened to and learned from are without a doubt Flat Earthers. I mean, if anything else, you can't deny that some Flat Earthers are extremely well researched. You might think they're wrong, you might think they don't know what they're talking about, but a lot of Flat Earthers are more well researched on the topic of the globe and the heliocentric model than 99% of the human population that believes they live on a ball for no reason other than their first grade teacher told them so.
Exactly. I mean, ask any globe believer ask any globe believer if they know the formula for the curve of the Earth. They don't know it. All Flat Earthers know it. Like, they've memorized it. You
would think that would be like the first little lesson they teach you in school, like in first grade. Hey guys, let's go see how buildings in the distance should be hidden by the curvature after 4 or 5 miles. You think it'd be like a field trip?
Yeah.
That all the kids would do, but they don't ever do that because it would actually get people scratching their head and thinking. It would actually get people in an airplane flying at 35,000 feet to look out their window and be like, man, I remember we learned about curvature in my class. And then you look out the window and you're like, where the fuck's the curvature? There is no curvature. Indeed, Neil deGrasse Tyson said you can't see it from 4 times that altitude.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're absolutely right, man. You're absolutely right.
Right on. Well, if you got to take off, I'll let you go. But thank you for coming on the show. And if you ever want to do it again, you're more than welcome to come on.